In this video, I'm going to show you how to configure Rollbar for an application where minified JavaScript files are deployed and source maps are generated. So there are two settings that are of interest here. One on line 9, so source map enabled is set to true, and on line 12, the code version is given. Obviously, different versions of your code are going to have different source maps, so Rollbar does need the code version to determine which source map to use. I also want to quickly review the various build targets in this makefile. So on line 6, there's a build target to generate the minified JS and the source map. And on line 28 here, there's an upload target which generates the command or the API call to upload the source map to Rollbar. Just something to note here, the curl command, that the API call is a multi-form data API call, and you need the -f between each parameter, and also you need the @ symbol here for the source maps parameter, because you need to stream the entire file up rather than just the name of the file. So let's now review the uploaded source maps. So we can see here that this source map was uploaded via our API, so via the curl command at a particular time. And now let's look at an error that I generated, and let's look at the line numbers and column numbers. So here we see that Rollbar has unminified the code and been able to show that this error occurred in logic.js on line 16 in column 11. And if we go down to the very bottom, what we can see is that we have a trace. Okay, and the trace has the unminified lines and column numbers, and the original trace has the minified lines and column numbers. So what I've done here is I have changed the code version, and I'm now going to deploy the application but not upload the source maps. So let's review what happened for version 1.16. So the first thing we see here is that Rollbar tried to get the source map. So when it was processing the error, we hadn't uploaded the source map ahead of time, but it tried to find the source map at the following URL. And it tried to do that because this string here, this source mapping URL tag, was at the bottom line of the JavaScript file. Now let's look at the error in more detail. And what we see is that we did not successfully find the unminified file, and the error says line number 1 and column number 146. And again, if we look down here, what we can see is there's a trace section in the raw JSON that was sent, but there's no original trace data. So what we're going to do is we're going to revert the code version back to 1.15, and we're going to restart the web application. But instead of starting the web application on port 8004, let's put it on a different port. So now my web application is running on a different port, which means that the URL is different from the URL for the source map. And let's go ahead and review the error data in Rollbar now. So what we see is that for version 1.15 running on port 8104 with the different URL, there was no uploaded source map, and we tried to find it and did that unsuccessfully. And now let's look at an error. And we see here that this here is the error here on port 8104. We were unable to find the source map, which means that we grouped it with the minified JS. And again, just to look down here at the bottom, what we can see is we can see the trace, we can see the code version, and we can see that we were missing the original trace. So we were unable to map the minified JS to unminified JS using the source map. When working with source maps and setting up your source maps, make sure to check out status.rollbar.com. It shows the processing latency for JavaScript source maps. So here we seem to be around the 9-second mark, so it's taking us about 9 seconds after you upload the source map for Rollbar to fully process it and for the source map to be available when an error occurs to be included in the fingerprinting process. There are numerous ways to upload the source maps. Uploading using the API directly, like I've been showing in the video, is one option. Another way is to use the Rollbar CLI. The nice thing about the Rollbar CLI is that it will recurse a directory structure and find all the source maps and upload them. So that's another option that's available to you. So I just want to finish up with 3 points. So the first is our REST API documentation and the API call to upload the JavaScript source map. And there are 2 sections of our source map documentation that I want to point out. So the first one is the curl command. And again, just remember to do the -fs and an @ symbol before each file name that you include in the curl command so that the entire file gets streamed rather than just the name of the file. And in the event that you are deploying to many domains, to avoid having to upload the source map for each domain individually, another option is to use a transform function. And a Rollbar transform function is a function that gets called every time an error gets sent to Rollbar just before it leaves your running application. And it's often used for advanced data scrubbing or advanced payload manipulation just before the error leaves your application. But you could use it to modify the URL in each frame of your stack trace so that for all domains, when the error arrives at Rollbar, it will have a single URL and a single uploaded source map will be able to be useful and be used for each of the domains that you deploy to. So thank you very much for your time. I hope this helps you to get your source maps up and running correctly and getting the proper line numbers and column numbers in your error data when reviewing the errors in Rollbar.